Hello, book lovers. It's Peg, and I'm not the book prize addict anymore. Well, I still am, but I decided to change my channel name for the summer anyway. I'm having such a good time out on the porch, knitting and reading and thinking about books that I just decided to kind of forget book prizes for a while. There's getting to be almost too many of them. Plus, I'll still be watching them. I love the other reviews I'm hearing on them from Jennifer and Eric, and I'm just going to sit back and kind of enjoy the book prizes for a while and just kind of read whatever I want for the summer, plus knit. So anyway, I'm sure a lot of people will be unsubscribing when they see my new name for my channel, but I'm surprised since I've been talking about knitting and showing knitting. I've had quite a few people, and even mainly guys, talk about that they like it. I know a few friends that have started and realize it's if it hooks you, it hooks you. It's just like reading. You either like it or you don't. But anyway, go guys, those of you who have said you knit. Actually, I'm not going to show my knitted item that I'm working on today. I haven't made enough progress, but I will show something I've done in the past. It's a scarf, kind of a scarf, and it feels good. It's kind of cool out here this morning. It feels good to have a little extra layer on. And I want to just tell you all that this yarn, it looks like I used a lot of different balls of yarn, but no, there's a certain kind of yarn that's made, and it changes colors, so you don't have to. So isn't that nice? Actually, okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit about books, and as I said, I'm just going to spend the summer drifting from book to book, reading whatever I want, no plan, bail if I want, who knows. Anyway, okay. I started this week with a book from Zola. Zola? I don't know. I don't speak French. Anyway, Emile Zola wrote a 20 series books, novels about life in France in the late 1800s, some early 1900s, and they're just great. I think somebody on BookTube was reading through the whole series, but I've read the first couple, and they really show the life of France, and it starts out in a small town, but then it moves on to Paris, and I found that there's a new translation of the one called A Love Story. It's, I believe, the 8th in the sequence, but they're about different people, so you don't really have to read them in sequence. And it has this beautiful cover painting, and it shows the story is of a young widow who moves with her daughter to the outskirts of Paris, and she talks a lot about what she can see from Paris from her balcony. And isn't that a great picture of it? She talks about the river and way across the field she can see the cathedral, etc. And it's just so neat, the descriptions of Paris in those days. It's just wonderful, and the story's very good too. He has a way with characters of really showing you a lot of what's going on inside their heads when they're flirting and talking to each other. So this young, beautiful widow causes quite a little story here. So that's very good. And as I said, it's a new translation. I found a list of new translations of older books, which I like reading, and I'm for some reason in the mood to read older books. Okay, while I was getting interested in Zola and browsing through my library shelves, I happened to find this book in the nonfiction shelf, neat, called The Disappearance of Emile Zola. And it's a story of, I had known a little bit about this during the Dreyfus case in Paris, the Jewish military officer who was accused of spying and being a traitor, and many felt like he was just being called out because of his Jewishness. And Emile Zola wrote a letter in his defense, and he in fact got in trouble himself and disappeared to London for a year. So this is a story of his time in London and what really happened there. And actually, it's quite good. I've noticed I like nonfiction when it has to do with authors and literary things. Which, speaking of, I also found another one about Joseph Conrad, who was called The Dawn Watch, and it deals with the really a longer biography type story of Joseph Conrad, who went to sea and of course wrote the great seafaring book Lord Jim, which I read many years ago. It might be due for an extra a reread, but I like this a lot because it talks about it has maps of the places that Joseph Conrad went when he worked as a seaman, and then it has the places. Okay, here we go. Okay, here's his travels. He's got lines where he traveled, and then the next page has places that his major fiction took place. So it's really interesting to compare the two, and you could see how he kind of went there when he wrote about it, and the book talks about the different places, both in the books and in his real life. So that was good. Okay, I noticed that a lot of people have talked about doing a short story a day or using short stories as palate cleansers. I think it was that Sean, the book maniac, who first mentioned it, and everybody, and I think that's a great idea too. I always say I want to read more short stories, but I can't just sit and read a whole bunch. Anyway, so actually Sean brought up this book, All the Beloved Ghosts, which was on a Canadian prize list last year, and I actually talked about it and read a few and then kind of forgot about it, and Sean brought it up that I had talked about it, so I had to embarrass myself. I'd almost forgot it, but luckily I still had it. So he's reading from here, and so I'm not going to call it a read along. I get too nervous if I read along to somebody, but we've both read the first story now, and I'm going to continue reading through it. And as I said, it's I can tell already that it's in the mode of Alice Munro, the great Canadian short story writer. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the short stories I read. Who knows what I'll get to reading out here this summer. I'm just going to wander from place to place. Okay, I have to leave and go to my knitting group, where a bunch of people will be sitting around talking about knitting and books. And of course, I always have to wear something I've knitted. So I'll see you later. Bye.